When you're using Photoshop to create video composite effects for a project, there are a few things that you need to consider and plan for in order to create files that will work in your main video edit master file. If you're using Photoshop as the primary video editor, you might be tempted to put everything into one big layered PSD file, adding the composite effects at each point in the timeline where they're required. For some type of projects, especially those that are not very long and have only a few simple composited elements, this approach might work fine. But for more involved video composites, especially those that use smart objects and contain a lot of complex effects to render, it's better to create separate PSD files for a specific effect and then render each one as a completed video clip that can then be added to a master video edit file. Before you even get into Photoshop, you need to take into consideration what the size resolution requirements are for the movies you record in your camera, as well as what the frame rate is. For recording in your camera, it's probably best to just record at the largest size your camera offers, and then size down if you have to later on. And make sure that the frames per second rate is consistent for all of the videos that you're recording. You can set frame rate in the timeline panel in Photoshop by coming over here to the flyout menu on the right-hand side, and then just choosing Set Timeline Frame Rate here. There are a number of presets that you can choose. In terms of an editing strategy for your composited shots, I have a couple of examples here to illustrate what I mentioned earlier. So this shot here is a sequence of a book at the edge of a river. And if I scrub through with the playhead here, you'll see that an actress's face appears, and then she looks up at the camera. So this is a sequence from a project we're going to be working on a little bit later in the course. This is all that is in this clip here, is just this one little bit. It's about 7-8 seconds long. And the reason I'm keeping it separate is because it has a number of layers that make it a fairly complex file. And I wouldn't want to create this composited effect in my main video edit file. So let's just take a quick look at this so you can understand why I chose to put just this clip in its own separate Photoshop file. So first of all, I have a smart object layer down here, which is the video of the actress. And then below that, I have the video of the river. Now that's also a smart object. So the river is a smart object because I have applied a smart filter to it and I've blurred the river. So this area right here you see, which is blurred, that's all a blur filter in Photoshop. If I double click on this river and book layer, it will open up the embedded smart object file, and you'll see when we open this up that this area will not be blurred. So there's the original clip of just the book by the river. I'm going to close that. And I'm not going to save it because I haven't made any changes. So blurs are pretty processor intensive, especially when you apply a blur to moving video. So that is something that takes a long time to render. That would really slow down Photoshop if I tried to apply all of these effects just for this one short clip in a longer minute or 2-minute title sequence. There's also a couple of adjustment layers here as well. I'm going to double click now on the smart object layer for the actress. And open that up. And you can see that this has fairly simple layers in it. It's got a layer that says white here, which just adds some white there. And I have an adjustment layer that brightens the background. I'm going to close that and not save it. And then additionally, I've got these extra layers right here. So all of that complexity in this one file is the reason why I've chosen to do just this one effects clip in a separate file. Then, once I render that out by going to the render dialog, I can take the finished rendered clip and come over here and place it into my master edit file. So what you see here is the master edit file that is the entire title sequence for this fictional TV mystery series called Bear River. And this is a project we're going to be working on later in the course. So you can see that each of these layers here is a video layer. Each of these layers represents a video clip that I worked on in a separate Photoshop file, and then I rendered out at the size that I needed to place into this master edit file. And if we go right here and scrub through on the playhead, we can see that there is the clip of the lead actress. And here's that layer right there. And if we go down in the timeline, there's that layer right there. So additionally, what I was able to do, which you may have noticed here, is that there's a little bit of a zooming effect here. You can see how I'm zooming in on that book as the clip plays. I don't have that zoom in the Photoshop file that is just this clip, because it made more sense to add that here so I could see how it works with the entire master edit file. So that's the reasoning behind keeping specific effects clips in separate files all by themselves, just to sort of make it a nice compact unit and also not to bog down Photoshop. All this stuff is pretty processor intensive. Knowing the size and frame rate requirements for the project you're working on is important for maintaining an efficient workflow. And if you're editing the entire video project in Photoshop, keeping complex composite effects in separate files can also keep the file size more manageable on your master video edit file. And if you're using another video editing program such as After Effects and Premiere, you're going to have to be rendering out those effects files as separate video clips anyway.